When it comes to pronouns, there are 8 types of pronouns, 8 categories, which sounds like a lot, and I don't think you have to memorize all of them. But there are just 2 categories that are quite large, and these are indefinite pronouns and personal pronouns. So indefinite pronouns and personal pronouns. In this video, we're just going to talk a little bit about personal pronouns so you can get to know them. And some of the explanations here will be relevant later on as well if you think about verbs, for instance, or other parts of speech. So we'll be focusing especially on how we can categorize these pronouns in terms of person, number, gender, and case. So just to reiterate the point I was making earlier, when it comes to these 8 types of pronouns, the reason you want to focus on these is not to memorize them all, but just so that if you spend a bit of time with each one, you can recognize them in a sentence, and that helps you to understand how the whole sentence is constructed. So let's zoom in then to these 4 categories that allow us to organize personal pronouns. The first one is person. And by person, we mean, as you can see here, this category here, there are 3 types of person. And the basic idea is that if you are by yourself, so let's say there's just one of you, then we call that first person. So that can be I, in this case, all the pronouns in this direction. It can also be we, and us, and ours, and our. So if there are multiple of us, and we refer to ourselves, then we see ourselves as the first person. If you're talking to another person or another group of people, let's add somebody else, then that would be the second person. And so you really get this idea that if the first person talks to the second person, then they are a second group. If in the distance, let's say, you see somebody else and you start talking with the second person about the third person, then now we're dealing with, third person pronouns. So these would be ones like he, she, it, him, her, it, and so on. And also the plural ones. So they, them, theirs, and their. Okay, so that's what person means. It's kind of a strange distinction, I suppose, but it helps us to organize all of these pronouns. We can also talk about number, and number is fairly straightforward. If there is one of something, then we call it singular, and if there are 2 or more of something, then it's plural. So we, you, they, and so on, these are all plural. Another way to distinguish between these pronouns is in terms of gender. This particular distinction doesn't apply to all of these pronouns. In fact, only in the third person singular do we really see this at play. So if we say he, that would be masculine, she, that would be feminine, and it would be neuter. In other languages, it's much more important to think about gender, but in English, it's not quite as crucial. And then the last one, and this is the trickiest one, I think, is case. So what we mean by case is the function of the pronoun in a sentence. And you can see that at the top here, as we've categorized these pronouns. So the subject is the pronoun here doing the action. If you were to say, for instance, I love fries, which is definitely true for me, then I would be in the subject position. If you were to say, well, I guess we can switch it around. We could say, fries love me. If you want to put the blame on the fries, then in this case, me is in the object position. In other words, it receives the action of the verb. Notice, though, that the term object can be construed in other ways as well. So, for instance, if you want to say, come with me, then with is a preposition. And so me is the object of the preposition. All right, when we think about possessive pronouns, these indicate that something belongs to something. And possessive pronouns can be either a subject or an object. Either one is fine for these. So if you were to say, for instance, yours is mine. I know this is kind of an awkward sentence. Yours is mine. And mine is yours. You can see you can switch these around quite easily, and either one can be the subject. And then the last one here, possessive adjectives. These are pronouns that are used as adjectives. Let's say you wanted to say our car. In that case, our is modifying car. So car is the noun, and if we say what kind of car, which car, then we would say our car. So lots of different personal pronouns. Again, don't memorize them all, but just try to get a feel for how they fit together and how we can organize them and categorize them.